Is Jehovah really God's name?
Right.
Now, be honest, when you hear that, you probably think I'm setting you up for, like, a round of Bible trivia down at the local pub.
It does sound like that. It sounds like we're about to argue over pronunciation or, some ancient Hebrew vowels.
Exactly. But we've got a stack of research in front of us today that suggests this question is actually a trapdoor. You think you're standing on solid ground answering some basic theological question, and then bam, the floor drops out.
That is a perfect description, because once you fall through that trap door, you are not talking about grammar anymore. You land right in the middle of this massive, messy conversation about human psychology and the limits of language and, honestly, the terrifying nature of trying to worship something you just can't see.
And that is the mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking a source text that traces this whole concept of the divine, specifically this identity of Jehovah, from, the dusty foothills of Mount Horeb in the Old Testament all the way to the upper rooms of the New Testament. And the argument this source makes is, well, it's heavy. It argues that the name Jehovah isn't just a label, it's a concept that the human brain actually sort of malfunctions trying to process.
And because we struggle to process it, we compromise. I mean, that's the human condition the source points to, right? When the concept of God gets too big, or too abstract, we start looking for shortcuts.
Which leads us to golden calves and political revolutionaries, and eventually this total identity crisis for the people following God. So yeah, buckle up.
Yeah.
We're going to see how a group of people went from worshiping a gold statue because they were terrified of the dark to a group of people who stopped calling themselves disciples and started calling themselves saints.
And just to set the stakes here, this isn't just history. The text draws a really, really sharp line. It argues that there is a massive difference between looking for a political savior, someone to fix your taxes or your government,
right,
and recognizing a spiritual reality. The difference between seeing a king who kicks out the Romans and seeing the self-existing one standing in your living room.
I want to get right into the weeds on this. Let's start with the name itself. The source text takes us back to Exodus 3.14.
Okay.
Most people, even if they aren't super religious, have probably heard the translation, I am that I am.
Right. It's iconic.
Yeah.
But the source argues that while I am that I am sounds really poetic in English, it's actually a definition. It points to the concept of the self-existing one.
The text uses a specific term here to define Jehovah. Jejonja.
Jejonja, yeah.
I have to admit, I stared at that word in the notes for a solid minute. It sounds like a tongue twister. Can you break that down for us? What are we actually talking about?
It's an older transliteration for sure, but the meaning is the gold mine here. Jejonja means one who exists by themselves.
One who exists by themselves.
Now, just pause and think about that for a second. That is a concept that is completely alien to human experience. Everything you and I know, literally everything in the universe, is contingent. It depends on something else.
Sure, I exist because of my parents. This microphone exists because a factory built it. Even the mountains exist because of, tectonic plates crashing together. Cause and effect.
Exactly. We are creatures of cause and effect. But this name, Jejonja, implies an existence that isn't dependent on anything. No beginning, no end, no creator, no battery pack, just being.
Which is a mind-bending concept if you actually try to visualize it. It's like trying to imagine a new color. You just can't do it.
And that inability to visualize it, that is exactly where the problem starts. The source highlights this massive psychological crisis for the Israelites. They're given this definition of a God who just exists, but they had never heard God's name before this point. No. And crucially, they had never seen God.
That's the tension the text keeps hammering on. Invisibility.
Think about their context. You have a people group who just walked out of Egypt. They're used to Egyptian religion. And say what you wanted about Egyptian mythology, but it was great for human psychology in one specific way.
You could see the gods.
You could see the gods. You have statues of Ra with the sun disk, Anubis with the jackal head. You can touch them. You can carry them around. You know exactly where your God is at all times.
Right, it gives you a sense of control.
Precisely. And suddenly, these people are dealing with the self-existing one who is completely invisible.
Yeah.
No statues, no images allowed, just a voice and fire.
And the source says this tension just snaps at Horeb. This is the famous golden calf incident in Exodus 32.
Yeah.
But the way the source frames it, it made me look at it completely differently.
Yeah.
It wasn't just them being rebellious for the fun of it.
No, it was a panic attack, a full-blown panic attack.
So paint the scene for us.
Okay, so Moses goes up the mountain to talk to this invisible Jejonja, this self-existing God. There's smoke, there's fire, the ground is shaking. It's terrifying. But then Nothing. Moses is gone.
And he stays gone.
He stays gone. The text says he was delayed.
And delay breeds anxiety. I mean, if I'm at the bottom of a volcano and my leader disappears into the smoke for 40 days, yeah, I'm going to start freaking out too.
Right. And the source paints this picture of the people's reaction.
Yeah.
They are staring at this void, this silence. They don't know if Moses is dead. They don't know if this invisible God has just abandoned them.
They can't handle the abstraction anymore.
No. So they turn to Aaron, Moses' brother, and they make a demand. And notice the wording. They don't ask for a theology lesson.
No. They say, make us a God who will lead us.
Make us a God. It's so utilitarian. They need a manager. They need a leader they can see, someone to take charge of the situation right now.
And Aaron caves. He collects the gold, melts it down, and creates the golden calf. Now, I've heard this story 1,000 times, and usually it's framed as, oh, look how silly and fickle the Israelites were worshiping a cow. But the source points out something about what Aaron says that I completely missed, and this is where it gets creepy.
Changes the whole context. When Aaron unveils the calf, he doesn't say, hey, everyone, forget Jehovah, here's a new Egyptian god.
Right, he doesn't introduce it as some kind of replacement rival.
No. The source quotes Aaron saying, this is your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt.
Wait, so he's claiming the calf is Jehovah.
He is trying to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
That is the aha moment of this section. The source argues they weren't trying to switch religions. They were trying to put a face on the self-existing one.
Okay.
They couldn't handle the void of the I am. It was too abstract, too scary. They needed a visual anchor.
So the golden calf wasn't really about rebellion, necessarily. It was about anxiety management. They were trying to drag this infinite God down into a shape they could understand.
And control.
And control.
Precisely. It was an attempt to make the infinite manageable. Here's a shiny object. I can look at it. I can dance around it. Now I feel safe.
That is uncomfortably relatable. I mean, we laugh at the cow, but that impulse to take something huge and scary and reduce it to something manageable, we do that all the time.
And the source pivots here to a warning for the modern listener, which I found really fascinating. It suggests that this isn't just an ancient history problem. It argues that unless a person is born again by the Spirit.
Meaning they have an internal spiritual capacity to perceive the invisible?
Exactly. Unless you have that, you are still doing the exact same thing today.
We're still making calves.
Internal golden calves. That's the phrase the text uses. It warns that if you cannot grasp the invisible God, if you don't have that spiritual connection to trust the I am, you will inevitably construct something in your heart to take his place.
Because we can't handle the void.
We are wired to worship. If we can't worship the invisible, we will worship the visible. We might not melt down jewelry anymore, but we create images of what we think God should be. Or we worship things we can control. Our careers, our political identity, our bank accounts.
Anything that makes us feel safe and led.
That's it.
That is a heavy thought. It's the idea that idolatry isn't just loving bad things. It's basically a coping mechanism for spiritual blindness.
That's a great way to put it. And that leads us directly to the solution the source proposes. Because the text argues that the Jehovah of the Old Testament, that invisible, terrifying, self-existing God, did eventually solve the invisibility problem.
Right. This is where we shift to the New Testament context.
Yeah.
The source posits that Jehovah God came in the flesh as Jesus Christ.
But, and this is a huge disclaimer in the text, it emphasizes that recognizing this is not an intellectual exercise. You don't just figure it out like a math problem or a logic puzzle.
Yeah.
The source states it is believed through the Spirit. You need that same spiritual sight we just talked about to recognize that the man Jesus is the invisible Jehovah.
And this brings us to one of the most provocative parts of the analysis for me. The text makes a really aggressive distinction between two types of people in the New Testament.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I first read it, I thought, are we splitting hairs here? It distinguishes between the disciple and the saint.
Yeah, I think most people use those words interchangeably, you know. Oh, the disciples, the saints, same difference.
Yeah.
In common parlance, they mean the same group.
But this text draws a hard line in the sand. Why? What's the difference according to the source?
Okay, let's look at the disciple first.
Yeah.
The source suggests that in the specific context of the Gospels, before the crucifixion and resurrection, a lot of the disciples were operating with a very specific agenda.
Which was political.
Rome.
Mm.
You have to remember, Israel was under occupation. Life was brutal. Taxes were high. Soldiers were everywhere. They were humiliated.
Mm-hmm.
The source suggests that the disciples, in this specific context, were those seeking political and social restoration. They wanted recovery.
So when they looked at Jesus, they weren't necessarily seeing the self-existing one who saves from sin. They were seeing a tool, a weapon against Caesar.
This worldly Christ, a revolutionary. They were following him, yes, but the source implies they were following him for what he could do for them politically. Fix my country, fix my economy, get these Romans out of here.
It's the golden calf all over again, isn't it? Make us a god who will lead us. It's utilitarian.
Exactly. A political messiah is just a golden calf made of flesh. It's a God designed to serve our immediate needs for safety and status. It's saying, I will follow you, God, as long as you deliver the political outcome I want.
That is a sting.
Yeah.
So then how does the saint differ? Because usually saint sounds like a stained glass window, someone super holy who never makes mistakes.
The source references 2 Corinthians 5.1 scene talking about being a new creation. But here is the fascinating detail. The text notes that after the book of Acts, once the early church really gets going and the Spirit is poured out, the term disciple actually drops out of the record.
It just disappears.
According to their analysis, yes. It was replaced by saint.
Oh.
And the definition the text gives for a saint is those who are called and those who are sent.
Called and sent. That feels much more active. But what's the core difference in mindset compared to the disciple?
Identity. A disciple, in that limited political sense, is waiting for Jesus to do something for the nation. A saint is a witness of Jesus. They aren't looking for a political fix. They have witnessed a spiritual reality. They believe that the invisible Jehovah has come in the flesh to save them from sin, not just from the Romans.
So the source poses this rhetorical question to us. It asks, is Jesus a current political messiah to you? Or is he the Christ who saves you from sin?
Was asking, are you a disciple looking for a regime change or a saint witnessing a spiritual truth? It forces you to examine your own motivations. Why are you following?
Is it for what you can get in this life, social recovery, status, political victory?
Or is it because you recognize the identity of God?
It's uncomfortable because it forces you to admit that you might be using God for your own ends, which brings us right back to that idea of the internal golden calf.
Which is the definition of idolatry, using God rather than worshiping him.
Okay, so we have this identity crisis, we have the psychological need to see God, but the source also takes us on this linguistic journey to prove this point. And I know linguistic journey usually sounds like the part of the show where people tune out to check their emails, but this is actually the glue that holds the whole argument together.
It really is. It connects the dots between the languages and shows how this identity of Jehovah traveled through time.
So how does it start?
Well, the source explains that the name Jehovah was considered too holy to speak aloud by the Jewish people. They wouldn't just drop it in casual conversation at the market.
So they needed a placeholder, a code word, almost.
In a way, yes. The source outlines a translation chain. In the Hebrew scriptures, when they saw the name YHWH, the tetragrammaton, they wouldn't say it. Instead, they would read Adonai Elohim.
Adonai Elohim, which means?
Lord God. It's a title of supreme respect. It acknowledges authority.
Okay. So then the Old Testament gets translated into Greek, which is the version the New Testament writers are using. What happens to Adonai Elohim?
It becomes Kyrios Theos.
Kyrios Theos. And if we bring that into English,
it translates strictly to my Lord, my God.
My Lord, my God. Now, that sounds incredibly familiar. I feel like I've heard that phrase in a very specific story.
You should. Because the source brings us to the absolute climax of this argument with the confession of Thomas. We're in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 28.
This is Doubting Thomas, the skeptic, the guy who missed the first meeting and said he wouldn't believe until he physically saw the holes in Jesus' hands.
The very same. And just think about the setup. Thomas is the ultimate realist. He refuses to believe in things he can't see. He's the guy who would have wanted a golden calf because it's tangible.
He represents that human need for visual proof.
He does. So when he finally sees the resurrected Jesus, when he sees the physical proof, what does he do?
What does he say?
He doesn't say, wow, it's you, Jesus. He doesn't say teacher or Messiah. He looks at this human being and says that specific phrase, my Lord and my God.
Kyrios Theos.
Which goes back to Adonai Elohim.
Which goes back to Jehovah.
Yes.
Whoa. So he's not just being polite.
The source argues that this is the moment. Thomas isn't just being respectful. By using that specific phrase, he is bridging the gap of thousands of years. He is looking at a human being standing in front of him and identifying him as the self-existing one.
So in a way, he's solving the problem of Horeb.
Yes. That is the connection.
Yeah.
At Horeb, they couldn't see God, so they panicked and made a calf. Here, Thomas sees God in the flesh, and he names him correctly. He recognizes the invisible I am standing right there in the room.
And the source wraps this all up with the concept of Immanuel.
God with us. That is the resolution. The invisible God isn't invisible anymore. He is with us. You don't need a calf, and you don't need a political revolutionary. You have the presence of the self-existing one.
It's really a fascinating arc when you lay it out like that. We start with the definition, I am that I am, which is terrifyingly abstract. We go through the terror of the void, trying to fill it with gold statues just to feel safe. We move through the political confusion of wanting a king instead of savior, and we end up with a confession, my Lord and my God.
It's a journey from confusion to clarity, from blindness to sight.
But again, the source reminds us this is mediated by the Spirit. That's the key ingredient. Without that spiritual insight, you're stuck at the golden calf.
Or you're stuck waiting for a political revolution that isn't coming. Or you're stuck thinking Jehovah is just a trivia answer. You miss the reality of the person standing in front of you.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? We've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the linguistics, the history, the theology. But the source really seems to want to push us on that question of identity.
It does. It
Yeah.
challenges you to ask, which camp are you in? Are you operating as the disciple in that limited sense, looking for God to fix your social standing, your political grievances, your immediate here and now problems?
It's the difference between asking, what can God do for me, and asking, who is God?
Precisely. The transition to being a saint, a witness, happens when you stop trying to mold God into a useful tool like a golden calf and start recognizing the self-existing one for who he actually is.
Even if he doesn't fix your problems the way you want him to.
Exactly. Even if he doesn't drive out the Romans.
That's the hard part. The golden calf was easy. It did what they wanted. The I am is uncontrollable.
And that is the thought I would leave with you. If the source is right, and we are naturally prone to idolatry when we can't see God, what is your internal golden calf? What is the thing you are trusting to lead you, to validate you, or to save you? Because the reality of the invisible God feels too abstract.
Is it your career? Your political party? Your reputation?
We all have something we want to say. This is the God that brought me out of Egypt too. The challenge of this text is to smash that calf and look for the true I am.
A lot to think about.
Yeah.
Check your own names for the things you worship. Thanks for diving in with us.
Until next time.